It's time for Media Meltdowns, and as we speak, Second Lady Vance is with her husband, Vice President JD Vance, in Israel as he works towards securing the second phase of the Gaza peace deal. And while history is being made thanks to the Trump administration that's already ended many conflicts and is right now focusing on ensuring that peace lasts in the Middle East, well, while this is going on, MSNBC's Jen Psaki and two other miserable Liberals, Jennifer Welch and Angie Sullivan, the hosts of the I've Had It podcast, have decided to attack the Vice President's marriage, suggesting that the Second Lady must need saving.
I think the little Manchurian candidate, JD Vance, wants to be president more than anything else.
Yeah.
I always wonder what's going on in the mind of his wife. Like,
Agreed.
Are you okay? Please blink 4 times.
Yes.
We'll come over here. We'll save you. And that he's willing to do anything to get there.
And then they went on to list all the ways that JD Vance is scary.
And that your whole iteration you just outlined, I mean, he's scarier in certain ways.
He's smarter.
In some ways. And he's young.
Yeah. And ambitious.
ambitious.
Young, smart and ambitious sounds absolutely terrible. Yet these miserable, liberal, middle-aged women also pretend that they know a thing or two about the MAGA movement.
JD Vance is not, he's in some ways goodish on paper if you like what he believes in. I don't know. But I don't know that he can take the whole movement with him.
No way.
I don't think so either.
There's no riz.
It's got no riz, right?
None.
And he just is a little odd. And
Totally.
so Trump's odd in a different way. So I'm skeptical of that. So yeah, he's got to. I mean, everything going on right now, and I think we have to be very clear-eyed about this, is about trying to manipulate the public around elections.
Yeah, they have no idea what is going on. But from one group of miserable Liberals to the next, let's check in on the hosts of The View, who, after all this time, keep taking the bait. They have no idea when Donald Trump is just trolling.
Can we bring up the, wait, hold on. Can you bring up the thing? Because he put something up the other day. Yeah, you see this?
Oh, yeah.
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 This is what I was
he's
going to
gonna
say.
be in that ballroom.
Somebody who is building something like this
I'm
does
gonna
not
be alive in some of these
does not
years.
intend to get out of office.
No, he
That's
doesn't
the thing.
intend.
He intends to enjoy
and pay
that
attention
tacky
to
ballroom.
this, because you know he's going to try it. He's going to try it.
Definitely.
The only thing that's going to stop him is us.
If we can. It's not going to be that easy to do.
Oh, whoopee. Now construction is underway for the White House, at the ballroom, I should say, at the White House. And MSNBC's Mika and Joe are basically in tears over it.
I mean, this is historic structure.
It's history being torn to shreds. And again, is everybody, I mean, so if somebody wants to go into the White House, the next person wants to just knock down all the walls and turn it into a disco, Congress can't do anything? I mean, seriously, you're destroying like one of the most historic structures on the planet.
Yeah, and the cost.
And are we saying that whoever we elect president has the right to destroy? Like what? Just tear things up, tear it to the ground, turn it into something else? Kind of crazy.
I don't think it's not your home that you purchased in Jersey.
No, it's not yours. You rent it from the American people for 4 years.
Joining us now is writer and broadcaster Esther Kraku. Esther, thank you so much for joining us again. Look, in the space of 24 hours, we've seen MSNBC's Jen Psaki attacking JD Vance's marriage, suggesting that Vance must need saving, and of course, you know, she will be the one that could save her. We've had Whoopi Goldberg and the other hosts of The View genuinely concerned that in the year 3000, Donald Trump would still be president because he's joking about it or posting an AI-generated video on social media. And Joe and Mika on Morning Joe on the verge of tears that Donald Trump is generous along with other donors and they are paying for this ballroom at the White House. But according to MSNBC, this is destroying the White House by putting a ballroom in. Can I get your reaction to all of this?
Well, I think the Jen Psaki and the liberal ladies on The View is they're kind of like incubators of mass psychosis. I never thought I'd see middle-aged women talking about Riz and people's husbands. I just can't believe the irony of this. But for someone like Jen Psaki, who's been no stranger to the whole, championing women and a feminist and sort of really buying into the whole gender ideology and championing trans rights and all of that. The fact that she thinks only some women can make decisions about their lives and their bodies and who they marry, but others are incapable of doing so is quite telling of the kinds of women that they actually want to empower. Jen Psaki herself is married with 2 children. I'm sure she wouldn't appreciate anyone saying that she is a hostage or even speaking about her own husband in such a derogatory fashion. I don't think she would appreciate that people would assume that because he's obviously a liberal man, that he's not smart and ambitious, which apparently she thinks are negative traits with regards to how she described JD Vance. And you see these memes of people trolling liberal men, which sometimes I think is unfair. They use Tim Waltz and all of these kind of hairless, vegan, blob-like men with no ambition who just say yes, wife. But people like Jen Psaki make it easy because how can you possibly paint out the traits that she's characterized JD Vance with as negative? Never mind the fact that it's completely inappropriate for her to speak on other people's husbands. And as for the ladies on The View, Whoopi Goldberg and all these other women who clearly don't have a clue and who are only getting ratings because, to be perfectly honest, they're talking about Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Again, they're really adrift from reality. She was like, put up the thing because Whoopi Goldberg doesn't even know how to ask for a cutaway to be put onto a screen. She's like, put up the thing because she's so hip and she has Riz. Honestly, they're just incubators of mass psychosis of liberal women that we're seeing in the US.
Oh, you're absolutely right. I mean, all those conversations being out for their audience in the space of 24 hours. It's funny to watch Jen Psaki try to come up with any attack on JD Vance, smart and ambitious, and then I think she came up with odd. That's they're struggling, aren't they? Now, the US military has carried out another strike on a suspected drug vessel, this time in the Eastern Pacific. This is the 8th strike against an alleged drug vessel carried out by the Trump administration. The previous 7 have taken place in the Caribbean. Pete Hegseth said yesterday, at the direction of President Trump, the Department of War conducted a lethal strike on a vessel being operated by a designated terrorist organisation and conducting narco trafficking in the Eastern Pacific. We've also heard from Secretary of State Marco Rubio. He had this to say at the White House.
The question is, bottom line, these are drug boats. If people want to stop seeing drug boats blow up, stop sending drugs to the United States.
But does it matter if it's in the United States?
Well, these are all in international waters. The boat.
Do a strike in the United States, or if Northern
Well, that's a different matter. Now you're talking about a law enforcement matter. In this particular case, there are people traveling on international waters headed towards the United States with hostilities in mind, which includes flooding our country with dangerous, deadly drugs. And they're going to be stopped. And that's what's happening. And in the case last week, you saw there was a submarine. It was a submarine. It was a submersible. That's a drug boat all the way through. We know what these boats are. The president just said it. We track them from the very beginning. We know who's on them, who they are, where they're coming from, what they have on them. If you're running drug boats, you're in grave danger.
It's a pretty clear warning. If people want to stop seeing drug boats blown up, maybe stop sending drug boats to the United States.
Yeah, I mean, the legalities is one thing. Obviously, people will say we need evidence. You can't just blow up ships in international waters that you are alleging to bring drug boats. But I think in many ways, the American legal system and the whole kind of use of lawfare has effectively almost driven the Trump administration to do this. Now, we see other countries has quite strong deterrence against drug dealing and smuggling. Singapore, for example, has the death penalty, and that is quite contentious in the US because while it is a federal penalty, it's not applicable in all states. So really the question is, what can the Trump administration do? Now, I must admit, blowing up submarine vessels in the middle of the ocean is quite cavalier. Many people would ask, why don't you get the Coast Guard to bring them into the country and arrest them and process them in the typical way? But then you also see, the Democrats crying murder over the fact that Donald Trump is deporting drug dealers and known criminals from the US. So even if he was supposed to go down the bipartisan route or the Democrats, who seem quite keen on allowing individuals that shouldn't be in the US in the US, would they act in the best interest of the American public and try and stop this this flooding of drugs, including fentanyl, into the US? Or would they continue to play politics with people's lives? Now, whether this will be effective, and you'll see a significant decline in these kinds of methods being used to smuggle drugs into the US, only time will tell. But one cannot say that Donald Trump's administration is not taking this seriously.
Yeah, and he's putting America first. Now, Donald Trump has announced tough new sanctions on Russia's two biggest oil companies as frustrations grow over the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. The president posted the sanctions list on social media and called on Russia to agree to an immediate ceasefire. Here is Donald Trump.
They're massive sanctions. It's sanctions on oil. The two biggest oil companies, among the biggest in the world, but they're Russian. They do a lot of oil. And hopefully it'll push, hopefully he'll become reasonable, and hopefully Zelensky will be reasonable too. You know, it takes two to tango, as they say, and we're going to find out. They hate each other. These two people hate each other. You know that better than anybody, and it makes it more difficult than it should be. This should be easier to do, but the level of hatred between Zelensky and Putin is very substantial.
Trump was also asked why he acted now, and he said, "I just felt like it was time. We waited a long time." Now, Trump has walked back his threat to use Tomahawk missiles, and he's tried to involve China by telling the media that Xi Jinping has the power to pressure Putin. Now, Esther, of course, negotiations over ending the war in Ukraine have stalled. Donald Trump put off a second planned summit with Putin in Budapest. So, Esther, I suppose these new sanctions are sending a signal that Donald Trump's patience with Putin is wearing thin, and he's really trying to ramp up the pressure here.
Yeah, and I think a sign that he's really kind of getting fed up with all of this, whatever Donald Trump looking fed up means, is that he's also put sanctions on India. So 25% sanctions on India, because India has been known to buy cheap Russian oil and gas and then sell it to international markets, to European markets, for example, at a hiked rate. I assume his next target will probably be China, which he didn't actually sanction. But I'm sure if he's very serious about this, we'll probably sanction in a few weeks. Now, he's also said that he hopes that this doesn't have to last very long, which is quite strange. When you sanction a country, you don't really want to tell them that you only want it to last a few weeks. You want the pressure to bite. But clearly, he is quite sick of what he thinks is Russia's stubbornness about concessions they want in the Donetsk region, and insistence on the sort of land trade and keeping basically most of Russian-speaking eastern Ukraine as sovereign Russian territory, at the very least a Russian satellite state. Trump has been kind of flip-flopping, because on the one hand, he's been, a few weeks ago, he promised Zelensky that he was going to entertain the idea of sending them Tomahawk missiles. On the other hand, he's now saying that, Ukraine has to basically concede to to Putin, because they don't have a chance of winning this. And in all of this, the Europeans have just basically become the insurance policy for Ukraine. You've seen them ramping up a lot of their sort of military contributions and aid to Ukraine, which is basically their way of kind of securing their own borders. But clearly, Trump is showing that he is not afraid to put sanctions on not only Russia, but people that are benefiting from Russia's flooding the natural energy markets with cheap oil and gas.
Esther, I want to talk to you about Japan, because Japan has appointed its first female Prime Minister, Sanae Takichi. She's a former government minister, a TV host, and once a drummer in a heavy metal band, but she is conservative and is inspired by Margaret Thatcher. Now, Japan's new Prime Minister has made it clear that there is a zero tolerance for illegal immigration and will be sending out illegals.
私は外国人との穏やかなお互いに思いやりを持って生きられる付き合い方はどうすればできるんか、一遍ゼロベースで考えるつもりです。毎年毎年、私たちと文化や何もかもがあんまりにも違う人たちをまとめて入れていくということ、この政策は一旦考え直さなあきません。経済的な動機でやってきて難民を主張する人、きちんとお帰りをいただきます。また不法滞在の人たちにも厳格に法律を守っていただきます。
Esther, her first diplomatic test will come in a few weeks when she hosts President Donald Trump in Tokyo. And I do want your thoughts on Japan's new Prime Minister, but I also have to get your thoughts on the leftist media's reaction to this in Meltdown, that a conservative has become Japan's first female Prime Minister. This is the headline on an ABC News article. Sane Takachi becomes Japan's first female PM, but some say it is not a win for women. And of course, this article has been written by a man, ABC's North Asia correspondent James Oaten, and this article attacks her conservative values. It goes on to say that her staunch conservative values has promoted traditional family structures. She supports current laws that prohibit married couples from having different surnames. She also opposed laws that would allow a woman to become an emperor. And they have featured this so-called political expert from Sophia University, Tina Burrett, in this article, who said it's almost like she's popular despite her gender rather than because of it. Esther, imagine that. Imagine becoming popular or earning your spot despite your gender.
I know, it's almost incredible. It almost looks like equality, which these people, I'm sure not too long ago, were bleating on about. Look, it only looks like women in politics is progress if they have the right kind of politics. And Takaichi is quite an interesting character. I mean, she's kind of centered herself recently in her politics. But if you look at the particularly on immigration that she's speaking of, in a country of about 124 million, you only have an estimate about just over 70,000 documented illegal immigrants, most of whom come from Vietnam and China and Thailand. But it's the frankness with which she talks about it, not making it a racial issue, not saying, like many people like to paint her as a far-right fascist or anything, just saying, if you break the law or if your way of life is not compatible with ours, you will not be allowed to stay. She's even talking about, tackling the asylum system, which Japan's asylum system is far from abused. They have a less than 1% acceptance rate. But it's clarity of saying, if this doesn't serve Japanese society, we will not accept it. Even if, and I'm sure when they get to cracking down on this illegal immigration, they end up rounding up about 100 people a year, if that. Even if that's all that matters, it's the principle of being able to have these discussions openly and say proudly, this is something that must benefit our society, or we will not tolerate it. That I think is blowing people's minds, and the fact that she's a woman as well, the first female prime minister saying this, is making these people's minds glitch. And I think in the West, I wish we could have these sorts of frank conversations. What is Western identity? What kind of immigration benefits our society? What should we tolerate? What should we accept? These sorts of things. And the fact that she's saying it so frankly, I mean, she was a huge fan of Margaret Thatcher. She actually met her before she died. And she was mentored by Shinzo Abe, who is the most successful prime minister in Japan's history. I mean, about a third of Japanese prime ministers only serve less than a year. So I think she's probably going to be quite successful in that regard. But, Western countries, take note.
Absolutely. Well, someone who's not messing around when it comes to immigration is Reform UK leader Nigel Farage. And the latest polling by YouGov shows that if an election was being held today, Reform would win. The poll has Reform at 26%, Labor at 20% and Tories at 17%. So a very clear lead. But this, of course, comes as Britain's immigration policy is failing. I mean, there are countless examples. Just today, Esther, it's been revealed that an Iranian man who was sent back to France under this one-in, one-out scheme has returned to the UK on a small boat, Esther. It's just showing that this one-in, one-out policy isn't working.
Well, you know what's even more hilarious? The government is saying that this scheme has successfully sent back 45 individuals, although it's no longer a success if we know that they can come back. Meanwhile, 11,000 people have crossed the channel in the last few months. You really couldn't make it up. It would be funny if it wasn't so depressing. And you have to wonder why Reform is leading in the polls. And this is a lead that I suspect is probably going to calcify. We're a few years away from an election, and when they're this far out, you have local elections going on in May next year, which Reform is probably going to completely destroy the Labour Party, which has never lost Wales, for example, since the devolved parliament was established. So these are just no-brainers. Why is Reform leading? Because in as much as Labour would basically like to point out that reform voters are racist or fascist or whatever. They're not handling the issues that many voters feel quite strongly about, and then they have no one else to blame but themselves. For them to even say that they have made a success of this by sending just about 3 or 4 dozen people back when you're having tens of thousands of people crossing the borders. Kemi Badenoch said, "So do we get 2 people sent back to France because this guy has come in twice?" It's laughable. It's a joke now.
Yeah, as you say, it'd be funny if it wasn't so depressing. The numbers are absolutely outrageous. Finally, just while we're in the UK, there's more chaos in the grooming gangs inquiry. 4 abuse survivors have now quit their roles in the inquiry over how the government has handled the process, claiming that the inquiry had become less about the truth and more about a cover-up. And Esther, now a child abuse expert, Jim Gamble, has withdrawn from the grooming gang inquiry, saying that there was a focus on political point scoring, which created a highly charged and toxic environment. I mean, it's so, even from being over here in Australia, very frustrating to see it being handled in this way.
Yeah, the grooming gangs will forever be to Britain's national shame. And Labour leading this inquiry is kind of like, marking your own homework. Jess Phillips, who's supposed to be the Minister for the Safeguarding of Women and Girls, basically stood in Parliament and said and called one of the victims of the grooming gangs who resigned over the fact that the probe is being watered down. She basically called her a liar by saying the probe is not being watered down and broadened, even though in the documents that these ladies on the panel were given, it said, should the focus of the inquiry be broadened and not only focus on grooming gangs? I mean, it's just ridiculous. There is evidence of this, and yet you have the Minister of Safeguarding Women and Girls actually calling a woman who has basically been gaslit her entire life and told to be quiet about the fact that she was gang raped by predominantly Pakistani men, to be quiet for the sake of community cohesion. Now you have the minister in charge of protecting people like that, telling her that basically she's a liar and gaslighting her in a unique and even more infuriating and more upsetting way. It was always going to be a mess. Keir Starmer only called for this inquiry after Elon Musk lit him up and basically made it politically untenable for him to continue to deny to have a national inquiry when we literally have national inquiries in Britain for jaywalking or crossing the road in a wrong way. So, I think this mess is going to continue, and unfortunately, Britain is going to continue to be ashamed by this national scandal.
Esther Kraku, writer and broadcaster, thank you so much for joining us on Power Hour. Pleasure to speak with you.